Amen. Welcome, Crossroads. I'm so glad that you are here. And I also just want to give a quick shout out to my friends at the other campuses at Hastings, Cottage Grove, and Eagan, as well as on YouTube Live. I'm glad that you guys have cabins and we don't. So yes, my name is Joey King, and I'm one of the youth pastors here at the Woodbury campus. And I'm just so glad to be here with you all this weekend. And I want to start off our time together with a question. And that question is, have you ever thought about the things that we do for love? You ever thought about the things that we do for love? If we were to sit down and grab lunch, and I talk to each and every one of us at all of our campuses, I'm sure that we would all be able to tell stories about all the crazy things that we have done in the name of love. Whether that's for a significant other or a friend or a family member, we've all done crazy things in the name of love. And just for some examples, there's for the love of our country, we've had people go overseas and fight in wars and battles and sacrifice time with their families, and even some people sacrificing their entire life so that they could serve our country. And really, that's what this weekend is all about. And I just want to take a moment and to say thank you to all of you that have sacrificed in that way, whether that you know somebody or you directly are that person. I want to say thank you for serving in that way. And they all do that in the name of love. And for the love of their wives, husbands will sit through a chick flick like The Notebook, or for the love of their husbands, wives will sit through football games every single Sunday. So football games like Vikings versus the Packers, when we all know the Vikings are going to win every single time. Hallelujah. Yes. Or for the love of youth ministry, last year on our mission trip, I took a shaving cream pie right in the face. Check it out. Boom. That's for the love of youth ministry. For the love of youth ministry, or for the love of your kids. You go to their football games, to their baseball games, to their track meets, to their swim meets, to their choir concerts, to their gymnastic meets. You go to these things, not because they're the next Michael Jordan, and not because they're the next Serena Williams, but because you love them. See, we've all done things in the name of love. We've all done things because we love other people. And I talked to some of the leadership across our campuses to kind of find out what they have done in the name of love. And the responses that I got back were interesting. And I want to share them with you guys. And so the first one I want to share is James Brown. We all know James. He's an interesting guy. And so I asked him, hey, what have you done in the name of love? And he was very quick to respond, which was interesting. Once you hear the story, you'll know why. He responded, he said, this one time when I had this cat named Olive, and the cat died. And he wanted to give the cat a proper burial because he didn't like the cat, but he loved his wife. And so he said, okay, I want to give this cat a proper burial because I love my wife. But the problem is this cat died in the middle of winter. It's really hard to dig holes in the ground in the middle of winter. So what he did, he wrapped up the cat, shoved it in the freezer, waited till the ground thawed out, and then gave the cat a proper funeral in the springtime or in the summer so that he could show his love for his wife. Awesome. I also talked to our youth pastor over at the Cottage Grove campus, Connor Rand. I asked him, hey, what have you done in the name of love? And he responded and said this one year when Winter Whiteout got canceled, and for those of you who don't know, Winter Whiteout is a retreat we go on with our students every single winter. And this one year, Winter Whiteout got canceled because the roads were so bad and the weather was so bad, it was dangerous to be on the roads. So we're like, don't leave your house. What does Connor do? He leaves his house and he decides, I'm going to drive to Winona to visit his then girlfriend, now wife, Callie. And I quote, he said, I almost died. So risky, but for the love of his then girlfriend, now wife, Callie. And I also talked to Hastings campus pastor Tim Stanley. And I don't know how many of you guys know Tim. I have a great relationship with Tim. As he was my Young Life area director, which is basically a fancy word for a youth pastor. And he also was my first boss as I interned with him when I first came on staff here at Crossroads. And I love Tim. And he told me this one story where one summer he spent an entire summer making a scrapbook for his wife, an entire summer. And when he told me that, I was like, oh, that's awesome. And I thought about it, it's like, man, you must really love your wife, because I remember sitting there doing your receipts and you do not do that kind of work. So I was really proud of him in that way. And then finally, I talked to Eric Anderson here at the Woodbury campus and asked him, what have you done in the name of love? And there was one semester, well, him and his wife Jessa were in college, and it was the middle of Jessa's history final, and he barges in to give her flowers. So good job, Eric. We're proud of you here at Woodbury. All of us have done crazy things in the name of love, and I'm sure that all of you have as well. But what's the point? Why do I share all of these crazy stories? Well, the point is love makes people do loony things. Crazy things that might seem like they just don't make any logical sense to every other person. And I want to ask another question is what does love require of us? Because if love makes people do crazy things, but what exactly does love require of you, and what does it require of me? In response to our relationship with God, what does God ask us to do? What does God ask us to do in response to his loony love for us? And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what does love require. Because if we say, yeah, I'm on the Jesus bus, I follow Jesus, I'm one of those Jesus and people, then but if our lives don't look any different, are we really on that bus? Are we really following Jesus if our lives don't look any different? And today we're going to look at a story of a woman in the Bible that put her love for God, for love for Jesus on full display for all to see. And so we're going to look at that in Luke 7, verse 36 through 50. And so if you have a Bible, you can go ahead and pull that out. Otherwise, there's some Bibles in front of you, or you can pull out your mobile app as well. And if you're using a church Bible, you can turn to page 789 to kind of follow along here. And so as you're turning to Luke 7, I'm just going to give a little bit of setting the scene of what's going on as we're diving into this story. So what's going on is Jesus has showed up. Jesus has been invited to a Pharisee's home for dinner. And Pharisee is just a fancy word for religious leader back in the time of Jesus. And so Jesus has been invited into this guy's house. And halfway through the dinner, a woman shows up. A woman that is known for being scandalous. That is known for not being a very moral, God-honoring person. She shows up and she walks into the dinner party. And what takes place is interesting. So we're going to pick it up there in Luke 7, starting in verse 36. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus to have dinner with him. So Jesus went to his home and sat down to eat. When a certain immoral woman from that city heard he was eating there, she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. Then she knelt behind him at his feet, weeping. Her tears fell on his feet, and she wiped them off with her hair. Then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. When the Pharisees who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. She's a sinner. Then Jesus answered his thoughts. Simon, he said to the Pharisee, I have something to say to you. Go ahead, teacher, Simon replied. Then Jesus told him this story. A man loaned money to two people, 500 pieces of silver to one and 50 pieces to the other, but neither of them could repay him. So he kindly forgave them both, canceling their debts. Who do you suppose loved him more after that? Simon answered, I suppose the one for whom he canceled the larger debt. That's right, Jesus said. Then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, look at this woman kneeling here. When I entered your home, you didn't offer me water to wash the dust from my feet, but she has washed them with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You didn't greet me with a kiss, but from the time I first came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. You neglected the courtesy of olive oil to anoint my head, but she has anointed my feet with rare perfume. I tell you, her sins, and they are many, have been forgiven. So she has shown me much love, but a person who is forgiven little only shows little love. Then Jesus said to the woman, your sins are forgiven. The men at the table said among themselves, who is this man that goes around forgiving sins? And Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. And I think that story is an interesting story. And so what's really going on here is there's a meal. Really, a banquet is going on at this guy named Simon, this Pharisee, this religious leader's house. And the guest of honor is Jesus. The guest of honor is Jesus. And halfway through this meal, this woman shows up. And so for us to understand this story, I think it's important that I just give us a little bit of Middle Eastern first century context, so us 21st century Americans can understand this just a little bit better. So in our day, when we have guests over, when we have a dinner party, the people come in and we sit at a table and we sit in chairs and we just eat there. But in Jesus' day, what actually went down is there was a really low table and people would actually sit on the ground and they would use kind of their elbow as a chair to lean on. And so that's how they ate. But also interesting fact is that when we have dinner guests over, the people that are invited are the only ones that come. We don't have strangers walk off the street and just walk in. But in Jesus' day, that's exactly what happened. The door remained wide open, and anyone that wanted to be a part of the dinner party could be. And so they were welcome to walk in and stand behind the servants and stand behind the couches and really listen in on the conversation. And that's exactly what happens. That's exactly what takes place here in Luke 7. There's this uninvited, unwelcome guest that comes and walks in. And really, we're not told her name, but we're told her reputation. And most scholars believe that she is a prostitute. Verse 37 says that she's a certain immoral woman, but most scholars agree that she is a prostitute. And I think it's hard for us to understand really what's going on here, really what's taking place here, because it's really a crazy, crazy scene if we think about it. Because we have this prostitute that's walking into a Pharisee's home. And that doesn't just happen. But this woman walks in because these Pharisees, they were the top of the totem pole in the world of religion. They were the best people around. They were the people that never messed up. At least that's what they wanted other people to think. They were the holy ones. And so for this prostitute to walk into a Pharisee's home was a big move. And the gasps and the looks that would happen as this woman, as this well-known prostitute, walks into this Pharisee's home. And really, could the two main characters be any different? Any different at all? Because we have a Pharisee and a prostitute. A holy man and a hooker. A man of the cloth and a woman of the night. Completely different people. About as opposite as you could get, and that's exactly what happens. It's a crazy, crazy scene that we see taking place here. And if you were to ask anyone in that town, if you were to go up and ask any person in that town between this Pharisee and this prostitute, which one of them is the more committed follower of Jesus? Which one of them is more devoted? Which one of them honors God more? Every single person would have said, Simon the Pharisee. Every single person besides Jesus. Because their actions show their true level of devotion to the Lord. Their actions show their true reverence to God. Because you see, when Jesus entered Simon's home, what did Simon do? Nothing. He didn't do anything to welcome Jesus into his home. There was no customary courtesies. There was no welcoming. There was no honoring him. And according to this first century Middle Eastern perspective, what was going on was very clear for everyone that was present to see. Simon was dissing Jesus big time. And in this time period, it was very common for people that were welcoming guests, especially people like Jesus, rabbis like Jesus, when they got welcomed to their home, there was three things that he should have done but failed to do. And the first thing is to provide water to wash the dust off the guest's feet. He didn't do that. The second thing is to give the guests a kiss, specifically a kiss on the hand, and he didn't do that. And the third thing was to anoint the head of the guests with olive oil, which was very common oil. And most likely Simon probably had olive oil on hand, but he chose not to use it. He chose not to anoint his head with oil. See, Simon was 0 for 3 with Jesus. Simon has completely disrespected Jesus, and everyone that was there knew it. Everyone that was there knew that really Simon has just declared war on Jesus. And they were all waiting. They were all waiting to see how Jesus would respond. So how does Jesus respond? How does he respond? Well, Jesus doesn't respond. Jesus doesn't have to respond. See, this woman, this unnamed woman, this prostitute responds for him. She's totally overcome by her love for Jesus. Her love for Jesus goes so deep that she cannot stand to see him be disrespected in this way. So she steps in and she compensates the insults that Simon has thrown at Jesus. This woman loves Jesus so deeply. Let's look at it again in verse 37 through 38. It says this: when a certain immoral woman from that city heard he was eating there, she brought a beautiful alabaster jar filled with expensive perfume. Then she knelt behind him at his feet weeping. Her tears fell on his feet and she wiped them with her hair. Then she kept kissing his feet and putting perfume on them. See, this woman, this prostitute, she's not trying to impress Jesus. She's not trying to earn the approval of the other people that are with her. No, she simply loves Jesus, and she can't stand to see what's going on. See, it's love that drives her to do these things, to do these crazy things, to do these loony things. Because again, I tell you, it's love that makes people do loony things. And her actions from a first century perspective, they were bold. They were scandalous. They were actually really appalling and shocking and outrageous. The way that she acted was loony. And she seems to have forgotten that she was in the presence of a very hostile, very male-dominated audience. And she responds out of her love. And everything that she does is full. It's full of meaning. And so there's 5 things that this woman does that I just want to look at here. So the first thing she did is she knelt down at Jesus' feet. And this is big because in this time period, you couldn't get any lower than being at foot level with someone. Let's look at Psalm 110:1. It says, "The Lord said to my Lord, sit in honor at my right hand until I humble your enemies, making them a footstool under your feet." In kneeling down to the foot level of Jesus, this woman was saying, I don't even deserve to be in your presence. This was a true act of humility. This was the woman saying, I don't even deserve to be in your presence. The second thing she does is she uses her tears to provide the water to wash the dust of Jesus' feet. See, Simon omits the common courtesy of simply providing water to wash Jesus' feet. So this woman compensates by using her tears. The third thing she does is she lets down her hair to dry his feet. And this is big because in this time period, the act of letting down one's hair was a very intimate act. It was an act that you didn't share with anyone outside of your husband. And for her to do this in the presence of a Pharisee in a holy man's house was big. This act was so serious that if she would have been married, this would have been grounds for divorce. And she does this in a holy man, a Pharisee's house in front of all these religious people. This would have sent shockwaves throughout the entire house, and people would have been waiting and waiting to see how he would respond, to see how Simon would respond to this woman's acts. People there would have thought this woman has obviously gone crazy. This woman is obviously doing things that just don't make sense. The fourth thing she does is she kisses Jesus' feet over and over again. When Jesus came to Simon the Pharisee's house, he didn't greet him with a kiss on the hand. So this woman, she compensates by continually kissing his feet to honor him and to show him her love. And the fifth thing, and this is probably the biggest of them all, is she anoints Jesus' feet with her perfume. See, Simon, he ignored the common courtesy of simply providing olive oil to anoint Jesus' head. He chose to not use the olive oil he most likely had as a sign of disrespect. And so this woman steps in and she uses a flask of very, very expensive perfume. This wasn't like $40, $50 expensive. No, this was expensive. It was really, really expensive. And she pours it out as a love offering on the feet of Jesus. And this is an interesting act because it doesn't take much imagination that if this woman is a prostitute, as we've kind of come to this conclusion, as scholars agree, is if this woman is a prostitute, And she's pouring out this flask of expensive perfume. This is crazy because that perfume was most likely part of her. It was most likely part of her livelihood. It was a symbol of who she was. It was part of her identity. But yet she willingly, Jesus doesn't even ask her to, she willingly pours out this jar of expensive perfume on the feet of Jesus. I think the question we have to ask is, why would she do that? Why would she do that? It seems like she didn't have to, so why would she? And I think that the answer is because she's come to a realization that she doesn't need it anymore. She's come to a realization that she's found something better because she has met the person of love. She's not met the person that changes everything. There was a time when she met Jesus, because I'll say it again, it's love that makes people do loony things. Because somewhere along the line, somewhere along the story of this woman's life, she had met Jesus. Verse 47 tells us that Jesus knew her from some encounter. It doesn't tell us what encounter. It doesn't tell us the story of that encounter, but it says some encounter. So maybe this woman met Jesus or heard about Jesus while he was healing blind eyes or opening deaf ears or raising the dead or working miracles. Or maybe she had heard that Jesus was someone who actually wanted to sit with broken people just like her. We don't know the story of her encounter. But what we do know is at some point, Jesus deeply touched this woman's life. At some point, this woman's life was changed forever because she had an encounter with the person of love, with the person of Jesus. At some point, she had received mercy and she had received grace. At some point, she was touched by Jesus' love. And it's love that makes people do loony things. Simon, on the other hand, this Pharisee, this religious man, he just didn't get it. He didn't get it. And he doesn't even seem to have gotten it even after Jesus spells it out for him. He seems to still be confused because Jesus says to him, hey, Simon, people who have been forgiven much, love much. People who have been forgiven much, love much. What Simon didn't get is that he was just of a big of sinner as this woman was. He had just as much sin in his life as this woman was because her list of sins, and Jesus recognizes this, her list of sins was long. Her list of sins was long, but she knew it. And his list of sins was long. Pride, arrogance, self-centeredness, hard heart. But he didn't know it, or he denied it. Because the truth is there's two types of people. There's two types of sinners in this world. There are big-time sinners who know it, and there are big-time sinners who don't know it or deny it. And how do you know? How do you know which camp you fall in? How do you know where you fall into this story? Just look at how you respond to God's lavish love. Because people like Simon, people that think that they're good enough, they deny grace. They debate it. They think that they can figure it out on their own. They think that they don't need it, that they're good enough. But people like the woman, they realize that they can't do it on their own. They realize that they couldn't follow this guy named Jesus without his grace. And after they devour the grace, after they continually go back to the grace, they express their gratitude. They express their gratitude. They empty out vases of expensive perfume. They let down their hair. They do crazy things. They do loony things. They do things that just don't make sense. Because for you, when you fall short, when you mess up, who do you look to? Who do you look to? Do you look to yourself? Do you think that you're just going to get out of this on your own? That you can fix yourself up? Or do you look to the person of Jesus? Do you look to the one who's already taken away your sin, who's already called you his own, who's already covered your mistakes? Who do you look to? Because our actions, they tell the story. Our actions tell the story. And speaking of stories, who do you identify with in this story? Who do you identify with in this story? And if you say the woman, do your actions back you up? Because I want to be like the woman in this story. Because I have been forgiven so much. I've been forgiven of so much. I know I've messed up. I know I've hurt people. I know I've done things I shouldn't have done and said things I shouldn't have said. But the good news, friends, is that I'm on the end of amazing grace. I've received that grace. But if I can be honest, I don't consistently act like it. So often I think of grace as something that I deserve, something that God has to give to me. And I've made it into so tame, so normal, so yes, God, I deserve that. When that's just not true. Because our response to grace should be radical. It should be crazy. It should be loony, because that's what love is. That's the love of God. And what Luke 7 has taught me is that this crazy, radical, extravagant love is appropriate response to God's love. When we respond to God's love, it should be crazy. It should be loony. And I want to close with this analogy. Have you ever seen one of those bumper stickers that says, honk if you love Jesus? When I see that bumper sticker, I think two things. There goes our campus pastor, Eric Anderson. And the second thing I think is it doesn't cost anything to honk. It doesn't cost anything to honk. Because honking doesn't take any energy. Honking doesn't cost us anything. Honking doesn't bring people who are far from God closer to God. Honking isn't going to change anybody's life. Honking doesn't end racism. Honking doesn't end poverty. Honking doesn't help anyone. Honking doesn't rebuild our kids' ministries here at Crossroads so that students and kids for generations to come can be encountered by the love of God. See, honking doesn't do anything. And the question we have to ask is, what does love require of us? Does love require that we honk? We just honk a horn and say, yeah, I agree with that. Does love require that we just share a post on Facebook so people know what side of the fence we are on? Or does love cost something more? Because I believe that love requires that we lay down our desires and say, God, use me. That's what love requires. Love requires that we look at the person of Jesus and say, God, I'm available. How do you want to use me? I don't care what it costs. I don't care what I have to sacrifice. I don't care what I have to do. God, use me. That's what love requires. Love requires that we sacrifice our comfortability for the sake of other people. Love requires that we go. Love requires that we lay down our desires so the God of the universe can use us. Love requires that we pour out the contents of our expensive perfume and we let down our hair. We do crazy things that people in our lives might look at us and say, why are you doing that? And our only response can be, man, I just really love Jesus. And this is what he's asking me to do. That's our response. And so that's my challenge for you. My challenge is that you do that. That you do whatever that thing is that God is asking you to do something that costs you something. My challenge is for you to do something that costs you something. And that over the next 4 weeks, figure out what that thing is and do it. And maybe for you, you're a student at one of our campuses. And you've heard all about this idea of going on a mission trip, and you're kind of, I don't know if I want to do that. Maybe for you, the loony act of love that you need to do over the next few weeks is sign up to go on a mission trip and say, yeah, I want to spend a whole week of my summer serving other people. That's loony. Or maybe for you, the thing that you need to do is you need to sign up to get baptized at Crossroads next weekend. You've been coming to Crossroads for a few years or even a few months or even a few weeks, and you know that God is asking you to step out in faith and declare in front of everybody else that Jesus is the Lord over your life. Maybe that's what you need to do. Or maybe the thing that you need to do is you have those neighbors that live across the street from you or live next door to you, and they're far from God. And maybe they don't even want anything to do with God. Maybe the thing that you need to do is you need to invite them into your life and love them and listen to them and try to point them to Jesus. Or maybe the thing that you need to do is you've been struggling with this idea. You've been struggling with this idea that we've been talking about the last 4 weeks, the for the next idea. You've been struggling with this idea of giving big gifts to God, to see change in our students and our kids' lives. Maybe you've been struggling with giving because you want to hold your finances so close to your heart and so close to yourself because that's what's comfortable. Maybe the thing that you need to do is step out in faith and give big and trust that God will provide. Or maybe the thing that you need to do is you've been at our Crossroads campuses for the past few weeks or past few months, and you know the truth about Jesus. You know the truth about Jesus. But you haven't made that decision. You haven't made the decision to follow him. You've been a little bit too scared. I don't want to put my full trust. What if he's not who he says he is? Maybe that's the struggle you're dealing with. And my challenge for you is to make that decision. And don't wait. Make that decision today because it'll change your life. Give God your everything because that's exactly what people who have been forgiven much do. That's exactly what we do. That's what people do that have been forgiven much. We do loony things. We do things that just don't make sense because we love Jesus and we want to show him our love. That's our call. That's our call. Because people that have been forgiven much, they do more than just sing some songs on the weekend. They do more than just show up on the weekend. They do more than just honk their horn. They do more than just share a post on Facebook. They do more than give God their pocket change. They do loony things. They do crazy things. And in fact, the looniest act of love this world has ever seen, it's the love of Jesus. The looniest act of love we've ever seen is there was a moment in history when God saw humanity in our pain, in our brokenness, and in our sin and said, I love them. And his response was to send his son to live the perfect life that we could never live and die the death that we deserve to die. And he took our place. He took our shame. He took our guilt. He took our sin. That's the joy of the gospel. And that's the looniest act of love that this world has ever seen. It's the looniest act of love this world will ever see. And so right now at all of our campuses across Crossroads, we're going to take a moment. Take a moment and remember that loony act of love in communion.